Well, hello. We are live, and welcome to How-To Diorama with Scale Model Craft. Sorry about that. I'm trying to coordinate how I come in and all that, and it's always just kind of a train wreck. But thanks very much for coming in, everybody. I'm really excited about today because this has been a really, really fun week. Right off the bat, I'm supposed to do this. Please like, please subscribe, and if you're in the replay, you can do the same thing, but you can also put comments. Please put comments, because when I post this replay on Saturday, I'm gonna kind of post it and relook at the comments and all that kind of jazz. So let's say hi to a couple of folks. So Paul was in earlier today, and I imagine he's going to come back. Thanks very much, Paul. It was like 10 o'clock 2 hours ago when he came on. And then Eric is here. Hello, Eric. Thanks very much for coming on. And Martin is here. Hey, Martin, thanks very much coming in from Holland. And I saw some of your posts this week. Great posts, talking about just starting out and getting back into it after a number of years not being in model building. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming in. So today what we're going to talk about is working on this latest diorama that I got. And I'm going to swap over here and show you what I'm talking about. So up here in my little moniker deal, I want to talk about changing the direction of the diorama a little bit. And what that is excuse me, I found this. So this was one of the original ideas for the diorama. And it's the Livens Large Gallery Flame Projector. And if you can see real tight there, oh, I'm sorry. Martin said, thanks. I really appreciate folks commenting, so I want to get that in. And then Paul is here. Thanks very much, Paul. That's awesome. So this is the Livens Large Gallery Flame Projector. This was installed underground within a trench system. And then that trench system, it extended very close to the German front lines. And what would happen is when this system was pressurized, and if you look on the left-hand side here of the picture, those are CO2 tanks. So those are just for pressurizing the system. And then these 5 large tanks here were filled with fuel. And I had the fuel. It's a different kind of fuel than they used in some tests that they recently did. But anyway, that would pressurize the system. Though that large fuel amount would then force this little nozzle to extend up through the sod, through the dirt, because it was below ground, and then it would spray, this chemical and fire on the German troops. And it wasn't just that it would spray the fire and then like propane or something like that, and it would go out. But this was a heavy fuel. It was a gas. And so this gas was a liquid, and it would go into the German lines and catch the lines on fire, get the soldiers on fire. It was a horrific weapon. It was invented in 1916, deployed 4 times. And oh my gosh, it was just a really incredible. This is a real weapon that existed. It's like 56 feet long. So I couldn't do a full-on diorama. It would have been like 3 feet long, as I was expressing in one of my shorts earlier this week. But it is big. Well, I can do something if it's like maybe in a test environment. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. So I kind of shifted the focus from the Hound of Mons on my diorama to this Livens Large Gallery flamethrower. So, excuse me. The other thing I want to talk about is modular design. So as I went into this, and I got to say hi to a couple of folks. Oh, that's very cool. Eric is here. Daniel's watching with me. He's taking notes. Awesome, Daniel. Hello, sir. Martin, it really unbelievable, isn't it? It really is. That mechanism, that machinery, that piece of whatever that he created. Oh my gosh, what a devastating piece of hardware. Scott is here. Hey, Scott, afternoon, Bill. Big shout out to the rest of you guys from Texas. Cool air, appreciated. That's awesome. Thanks very much for coming on, Scott. Those folks have been having a heck of a time. Also, if you're not aware, Hawaii is going through a very, very difficult time. And I'm all excited about this kind of stuff, but there's a lot of folks in Hawaii that are having a heck of a time because entire cities have been wiped out by wildfire. If you haven't seen this, it's something to kind of keep in your thoughts, people, and look it up and see if there's anything you can do to help. It would be great. Okay, so that was Scott. So anyway, back to the Livens gun. So this thing I needed to put underground. So what I started out the week doing was carving the foam and then trying to create these spaces to give, a viable story. I want something that's going to look right. I want something that's going to look, like it could have existed. Now, the fact is none of what I'm doing ever existed in World War II, or in World War I, I'm so sorry. But that's the kind of like the fantasy element. I like to do things that seem to be like a little bit of fantastical, I guess. So what I did first was I cut in the vertical down shaft, and then I built a little bit of a down shaft for it. I set it back in because I don't want it right up next to it. Just the way that I had things designed, I had to kind of set it back. Then I painted everything because what was happening was I couldn't get a good visual of how this would look. When you're doing your diorama, I think it's important to consider, and we're going to talk about eye line and things like that, but I think it's really important to consider what the overall visual look of the diorama is going to be, especially when you're doing a diorama like I'm doing, where it's larger, it's got an underground element, or maybe it's just like maybe you're doing a wall scene or something like that. Consider how, when you stand back and look at it, consider how that looks. So by painting it black like this allowed me to go ahead and get a better, just a visual signature of the whole thing at once instead of the pink. It didn't help. So by doing that, I got a much better look of it. It kind of did this for me. It set it up so that I can make decisions a little bit more. I was able to block out other stuff and see where I wanted these details. And I also have to consider, like the trenches that are going to go in here. We're going to get to those, but right now we're going to look at this. So scale woodworking for a diorama. That's one of the things that I did this week. So in figuring out where these like rooms and these details are going to be, I carved out this huge room. I mean, this is like a 2-story room underneath the World War I line. Now, the fact is they did have some large rooms underneath, underground and stuff like that were built up over time. Whether it was this large, and certainly whether it was used for this purpose, yeah, I doubt it. But that's part of my story, and that's part of the diorama. It is a fantasy diorama. And so what I did next was I started building the wood for it. Now, a couple of things about building in wood underground, or just like building wood in a diorama. One of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to build it so I could work on it outside of the diorama. I see a lot of folks, even the kind of dioramas that I do, they build into it, but they attach things to it. And I've certainly done that. But as I get a little bit more, I guess, familiar with it, I decided, it really makes a lot of sense to try to build things that are not attached right away. So I did everything in a modular form. So like right behind me, you can see I can go in here and I can just pull this thing out. And that's the entire little place that I built inside the diorama in that room that I created. Now, the cool thing about that is I can work on this outside the diorama. I'm not fishing into that little compartment or that little opening that I created and try to mount things into it. Really difficult. But this way I can just do all of my work. I can add the details inside here because I got a bunch of stuff that's going inside here. And when I'm done, I can just slip it right back into the diorama and it's done. Now, I'm going to have electrical, there's going to be wiring, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on with that. That's only going to allow that to be a lot more useful as I go on. So this idea of building in a modular form, I really want to get that across because it's really helped me in down the road. Even if you have your diorama completely planned out, I think one of the things that you have to consider is down the road, you might have another idea. You might say, hey, this needs to be changed or whatever. And if this whole mass of this diorama were glued together, fastened and stuff like that, then I got to crack into it and I got to dig into it. Or heaven forbid, pardon me, I might give up on that idea. And I don't want to do that. I get a lot of ideas while I'm building, and I want to be able to explore those ideas. I want to be able to put those ideas in. And by having my diorama completely modular at this point, then I can do that. And I can make modifications and I can make changes. And there were lots of changes this week. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, I want to go to our comments here because some folks had some comments. Okay, so afternoon, Bill, big shout out for the rest of you guys. I'm Scott, you're getting a lot of airplay because I think we've looked at this comment 3 times. I'm sorry, but I'm glad you're here. So that's great. Almost has a 3-dimensional comic book look. Thanks, Eric. And I want it to have a lot of depth. I want it to look like something that you want to go in and investigate and see why this stuff is there. The comic book angle is kind of cool because it's almost like seeing a little panel in a comic book, and I love that. And of course, Wolfenstein was built directly with that in mind. Comic book, video game kind of a vibe to it. Martin says, can I ask Bill, do you sketch your imagined end result on paper and then determine what modules you might need? No, and that's a great question, Martin. I don't. And I've discussed this before, but it's always great to look at it because I like to go in with a general idea and not really have a solid idea. I mean, sometimes I get like this full expansive idea and that'll work great. But most times it's not like that. Most times I go in and I have this very nebulous, very kind of an idea, or I have like one element that I'm really excited about. Or like maybe there's a specific model that says, man, I want to do this model and then something with it. That's kind of how it starts. And so as I go through building the model, stuff is kind of revealed to me. When I started this particular diorama, I had no idea I would be, I did, like I said before, the Livensgun was an idea to show the Livensgun, and certainly to show the Livensgun underground because that's its natural environment. But I didn't know I was going to do what this is, and frankly, I haven't even said, this is going to be his laboratory under the front lines, because the idea is this. He designed this in 1916. 4 of them were deployed. I don't know how many actually fired. I do know that some were fired, but there's a show that I watched where one of the Livensguns, they were looking up one. It was Time Team, a UK show, great show. I believe it was done in 2015 or even earlier. And they rebuilt, and then they excavated and found the remnants of a Livensgun and the trench that it was placed in France. So during that show, they're looking at it, and in this instance, as it was being built, because what these things were is they were completely done, and then they were disassembled, moved to the front lines. A trench was prepared. It was moved into that trench, assembled, fueled up, and then fired. So during that process in the show, artillery came in, hit near the tunnel, collapsed the tunnel on the Livensgun. And so that's where it stayed for 60, 70, 80 years. Oh gosh, no, 100, sorry, 100 years. So how it was deployed, we know from, text that I read and stuff like that. But And Martin just asked, let me get to some of these comments. Mark Dramer says, hi guys. And then Martin says, what's the name of the show? It's Time Team. But if you look on YouTube, just look up Livin's Flamethrower. That's what I did because I couldn't remember the whole name. Look up Livin's Flamethrower and you'll find it. And look up videos. And it's a great. I like Time Team. It's a wonderful UK show. And I've watched a whole bunch of them because I love archaeology. And so that's been a really neat show. So it's the Livin's Large Gallery Flame Projector is the actual name of it. But just look up Livin's Flamethrower and you'll find it. So back to this thing. I do not go in and have everything finalized. The story kind of emerges and reveals itself to me as I go. And in this instance, this laboratory that I'm going to have in here, that was completely a fantasy. And as I looked at the space that I'd created for myself, as I looked at the depth that I had, then I just imagine these things and then build them in. And that's really fun for me because it keeps it like a discovery. If I had plans or maybe even a drawing to go from, I don't think that's a negative. I think that would help, a lot. But I'm able to, some people are able to, some people aren't. I'm one of those people that's able to see things in my head really well. I can see the imagery. I can walk it. It's like a CAD drawing, but it's in my head. And so for me, when I get an idea, I'm able to go ahead and just move it around like it's CAD drawing in my head and look around it, blah, 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 like a hologram or whatever. I can just see it at any scale, at whatever. Well, if you're not able to do that, I think that CAD drawing is great, or just jot it down, rough sketches. I have done rough sketches, and I actually, if you saw earlier, I do rough sketch on the outside of this, sure, but I don't ever really have a full plan for any of my dioramas, even very simple ones. I kind of let it happen, and I really enjoy that part of it. Again, it keeps it very much of a discovery. And when I discover these things, I'm like in the shop and I'm thinking about it, and then I get these little ideas and bang, it hits you like a brick wall, and it's fantastic. I mean, I'll jump around and I'm yelling and stuff like that. I'll even go in and tell my wife, that I have this great idea. It is so fun that I don't want to interrupt that. I just think that is just a really neat thing, because when I'm starting a diorama, I have an idea where I want to go, and I'm just beleaguering this point at this point. But I have an idea of where I want to go, and the journey is just so awesome that it's literally just like I discover stuff as I'm going. I'm building it and it's coming out of my head, but I'm discovering it too. It's kind of weird, but it's totally fun, and I love that part of it. Okay, so now we're going to look back at this. Working with wood when you're doing this stuff is pretty important to get a cutter. And what I mean by a cutter is, I mean, I don't have one, but I've been doing this long enough that I make little jigs. And, well, gosh, now I don't even know what I did with it, but I have a little jig. Here it is. Sorry, I'll be right back. This little jig is something that I made up just so I can have consistency. And the reason is, if I'm just trying to cut these things, when I cut with a hobby knife, X-Acto knife, what do you want to call it? When I cut with these things, it doesn't cut like square 90 degrees. A lot of times it'll do this or it'll do this, because the blade, in relation to the size wood that I'm cutting, it's just like this little stick. It's 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch. That's the beams on the things that I'm making. If you just cut those and don't pay attention to the end, then when you try to join them, you're going to have like this, right? Or you're going to have like this. Well, it doesn't seem like that's that big of a deal, but it is. When you're doing something like this, so small, every little thing that's not exactly correct will throw everything else off. in building this, there were quite a few times that I had to go back and not restart, but modify the original design to keep it in spec. And by spec, I mean to be able to fit right back into that slot or that compartment that I made. It's a big deal. So if you don't have maybe a shop, or you're modeling maybe even on your kitchen table, that's totally fine. Lots of people do. And you can't make one of these because all it is just a board that I can index against here, right? I can index against it, and I can do a straight cut or I can do a 45, and either way, that's all this jig does. If you can't do that, I would say try to look at one of those little cutters that you can get online. And there's a bunch of them, so I'm not going to mention a name because I've never purchased one, and I don't want to endorse one over the other. But if you do get a cutter, I think it's going to help you because hopefully you can be consistent. It's very important. All of these, to make these all fit in here properly, they had to be all the same. And if you just kind of say, I'm just going to fudge it, it's going to be just wonky as heck. Now, being a woodworker, I understand how to do this. And one of the things that I'm looking at doing here in the future is, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later on in the live cast here, is I'm going to put together a little class that I can do online live, where everybody's live, not just me talking and you texting, but everybody's live. And we go through and we build some wood stuff because I've got a heck of a lot of, background in it. And I just want to show other people how to do it because, yeah, it does take a little bit of work. The other thing about working with wood in scale is don't forget about gravity. We are doing stuff in scale, right? And I can have like a cantilevered thing like that, and I can put a figure on it. I'm just being silly here, but I can put a figure on it out there, and it's just going to be fine, right? That's not in the real world. In the real world, we're going to have a lot of weight. So you can't cantilever something, and by cantilever, I mean like having something sticking out with no support, like that far from a wall. You can't do that. You can do that, this distance, but you couldn't do like that distance. So those are the kind of things that I'm talking about in trying to get something believable. You really got to look at regular building. You can't just go in there and go out of memory unless, you've got this background like myself and other folks that may be online here. So look at that stuff. It's not hard to understand, number one. And if you have some examples for this, I'm basically using a timber frame model. And you can see the timber framing inside there. And then once it's done, I just put the cladding on the outside of it, and it's done. So it's very simple, but you got to start out with squared up wood. You got to make sure that that's correct. You got to make sure that you understand a little bit about, construction and the dynamics of wood and how it works. Certainly gravity is a big, big deal because I have seen some things that it's just not, that wouldn't be believable. And as soon as you plant that little, that's not quite believable, or it's not a fantasy element, because there's the unbelievable part that it's a fantasy and it's fun, and we like it. But then there's the unbelievable part, like the guy's got a magazine, like the old Rambo movies. He's got a magazine in there and he fires 150 rounds and he never changes his magazine. That right there can really destroy it for a lot of people. And that's what I don't want you to do. If you're building your diorama, try to get the realistic as possible, even if you're telling a fantasy. This is a complete fantasy. This is a made-up story, but I want it to look as real as possible. So study that stuff. Get some things that are going to help you cut square stuff. That was really the biggest thing that I noticed when I was building this thing. If I didn't get those things square when I cut them, everything goes off. So those are, I think, my biggest tips for doing it. And I'm going to do it in an upcoming class that I do online. And I'm not going to charge for it at first, but it's so that I can figure out if I can charge for it is what it is. So I'll tell everybody, and maybe you guys can be part of it. It will be really fun. Martin says, I guess you just use the force. Yes, a lot of times when I'm trying to figure out the design, the force just happens. you know, and you can't stop it. Evan is here. Hey, thanks, Evan, for coming by. Evan can't always make it, so this is really, really fun for you to come in, Evan. Thanks very much for making it. He's been working really hard doing a refurb, and that's really cool that you made it back in and could see it. Hey, John is here. Hi, Bill. I'm curious how you cut out the room and tunnels in the foam after the foam layers were bonded. Ha ha! I love that question. And thanks very much, John. And we did not plan this, but I have a great answer for you. So that's the other part of the modularity stuff. I'm going to go back to my slides real quick, and I want to go through this and just show you, you know, the progress of building this. And then I go through that, and then once I've got it, you know, multiple times I'll slip it in there to make sure that I've got my proportions right. And this is my little guy that you know I use to just kind of scale everything. I just put him everywhere inside the diorama as I'm going. And I think it looks good, and I'm happy with it. And then I kind of progress. I look at different angles, and we're going to talk about eyeline. We're going to talk about angles because it's hugely important. And then finally, that was the end of it. Okay, so now this is the main gallery. I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is I am going to try and show you a video, because this really talks about what John is asking about, and that is the foam. You know, how do I work on the foam once it's already bonded? Well, the first thing is I don't bond it, right? Not at this point. There are certainly times where I'm gonna take all these layers, and some I want to bond. I want to put them together. I want to, you know, use my glue and stuff like that and get them together. It's not quite that time. So right now, as I'm cutting things, I can take, and I got to be careful here, but I can take these top elements right off the diorama. Both of them come off. They do have some things attached to them, but those are good. Then I can take out this guy. That's my vertical mine shaft. They enter through that. And then I can just take all these off. And it's quite a puzzle. So here is the main gallery. We haven't looked at that, but I've got some stuff to talk to you about that. And then I start peeling back layers. And as you see, each layer has quite a bit of work done to it. So we're going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to show you each layer because it's really kind of fascinating. And it really does take a little bit of figuring out, you know, to work these levels in between these different modular layers or levels in the diorama. So first off, the bottom, as I do with all my dioramas, the bottom is attached to and glued down to a 1/4-inch piece of MDF. That gives it its rigidity and stability. Okay. This is 2-inch XPS. No, it's not XPS foam. It might be XPS foam. It's rigid insulation foam is what it is. Now, the funny thing is remember, I say I do this bottom for rigidity. Well, watch this. I hope you can see this. If I put this thing down, it can spin, basically. You can't really see that. Well, basically what it is it's a little bit bowed. And so the bottom, this is kind of bowed this way, and so it actually spins. So yeah, even when you prepare, sometimes it'll happen. So anyway, the bottom then, from the front, here's the front angle of the bottom. This is what it looks like. Okay, so now I've painted some of it black, some of it not, and the painting of it black allowed me to see it a little bit better. Okay, but this is the bottom level, and you can see how it's carved out. Now, I've got something to show you about how it's carved out. Let me see if I can do this without messing up the whole schlemizel. Here we go. So watch this. So this is just me using my router, my little hand router, and I've got a, I think it's a down spiral bit, meaning that as the bit is spinning, it's got these large flutes on it, and as it cuts, it's forcing the material that it's cutting downward. And that's important for me because I'm just going to play it again so you can see it again. Because that's it. That is just a real quick video. But what's happening here is I'm able to go ahead and get the full depth that I need in one shot. And that's pretty important because I want to be able to have this whole thing as flat and as even as possible. And so that's what the router allows me to do, is just get in there and make these cuts. If you'll notice, I'm over my downdraft table, and I think that's a really important part. The downdraft table here allows me to go ahead and pull all of that. It's not sawdust because it's plastic, but all that stuff that I'm cutting away, it pulls it down. Secondarily, and I'm going to go back to here, you'll notice that right here, I've got my hand, my left hand on the vacuum, and I'm getting that stuff and capturing it as soon as it's coming off, because this stuff is just nasty. You do not want to use a router. You do not want to use like a rotary tool on this foam if you don't have some way to vacuum it up like I have here. Now, the other thing that the downdraft table is doing, and by downdraft table, if you're not aware, what a downdraft table does is there's a box, there's an open box below the table where all those holes are. And then I've got a large 6-inch pipe coming to it. And that goes to my dust collection system. That dust collection system is drawing a lot of air downward, right? And so what I do is when I put that on there, it's also holding the diorama to the table. So the downward force of that air is pulling the diorama down. So that's giving me stability. If I didn't have that and I was just using this on, let's say, my tabletop or a bench top or something like that, then I would want to clamp it down because I've got one hand on the vacuum and one hand on the router. If that thing is not secured solid, that could be dangerous. And I don't want you to do anything dangerous. So yeah, this thing worked really great. I really enjoyed doing it this way. And I had to go back a couple of times. It was not like the very first shot, I got all these things done and it was there. I had to go back and do modifications, and I had to also go back and do modifications with the wire cutter. Okay, I got a couple of comments here. Eric says, ingenious. Yeah, I thought it worked out great. Again, by having the shop, by having these tools, it really does make it really nice to be able to say, hey, I want to do this. I don't know how to do what I want to do, but I've got all these tools and I'm ready for it. That's kind of how I built the shop. I've just got a lot of stuff available when I have an idea that I need to execute, and those are the tools I need to execute it. So great thing about a shop. And Rick is here. Hey, thank you very much, Rick. Really appreciate you coming by. Rick Lawler, if everybody hasn't been to Propaganda, he's got some great stuff coming out. Thank you very much for coming by, Rick. So anyway, as we are doing that cutting, I had to go back and forth a couple of times, as I said, to route this thing out. So let's look at another level. So up from that bottom level, the next layer is this. And here's the fun part. So what I did on that bottom level, I have to mimic in this level because I'm basically splitting the room between two levels. So yeah, it gets a little complicated when you're doing that kind of stuff, but it's not too hard. You know, I'm not doing super complex shapes and stuff like that. So you have to kind of consider that. Next level. Now, this one I haven't done a lot to because I have plans for that. So that's later. That's almost like we'll call it a surprise. Here's the next level. This one and the next one got a heck of a lot of work. So all of this was done basically bit by bit, you know? I mean, I cut this part first, okay? And then this part. And then I did this part. And then I did this part. And then I come back and did this part. So it's not like I sit down and have this all in my head and then just rip it all out and then start building. No, not at all. I have to go back and then modify some of the things that I've already done and work around situations that I get in because of that, and do mods and stuff throughout the build. This is not just at the beginning. I do this throughout. So that is why, for me at least, if you're much more organized and you've got a much better brain than mine that can figure this stuff out, awesome. Or if you do it in CAD, I bet you could do it in CAD one heck of a lot easier. And I know CAD, but I don't want to do CAD. Anyway, then you could do all of this like in the first shot. Nothing wrong with it. I just really like, I can do that. You know what I mean? That feeling. You're working along, and because this is how it happens when I'm working on a diorama. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this and da-da-da-da-da and all that kind of stuff. And I'm done with this part, and I put it down and I sit back a little bit and I go, holy crud, I could do that. That's when I talk about the excitement and these ideas or these little epiphanies or something like that. That makes it so fun. It makes it incredibly fun for me. That's just the way that I work. And, it just may not work for other folks. It just may not be your way of working. And that's totally cool. I'm just showing you how I do it. And if you're interested and maybe kind of have a brain like mine and think like mine, this might be a way for you to do it. I hope, because it's super fun. So I got to go back to a couple of comments here real quick. Evan says, I watch Rick a ton. Fantastic mod. Yes, he is. He's absolutely fantastic. I met Rick before I knew who Rick was. It's a story from a few years ago, and it's pretty funny. But it's just basically me being a lunkhead, which is no surprise. And it was a lot of fun. So Rick is brilliant, and I love his stuff. There's an element of freedom there, right? Yeah, hugely, Martin. One of the things that is, it's kind of funny. Today I received a call, like right before the show, like at 11:30 before the show, from an old friend that I used to work with for 20 years. And he was asking me like an old account that I worked on. And it was fun in business, but in business, you've got constraints, right? And we're going to talk about constraints, oddly enough. So very nice comment, Martin. But I had a lot of constraints. You have to work within boundaries, and you have to plan all these things around the needs of others and capabilities of your business. That's what I did for 30 some odd years. Well, when I am doing this, I know what the end result is, but I feel like an inventor almost, because I know where I'm trying to get. It's not been done before. I've not seen, elements of it, certainly, absolutely. I've seen elements of it, but I've never seen it configured or built in this way with this meaning or this story. And that is an incredibly freeing and wonderful feeling. It is a lot of freedom. It does allow you to find things that excite you. And because I'm not so staunchly held to this need to complete this as drawn, as designed, as initially conceived, I'm not held to that. I can discover it along the way. And by building in this modular form, by having these things unattached, it allows me to go back and make those modifications without a heck of a lot of pain, without a lot of deconstruction, right? Because that I've done that. I'm not saying I haven't. I make, mistakes all the time. But when you have to go in there and maybe ruin or partially disturb something that you've already done, that's kind of painful. You don't want to do that a lot. And so this modular form allows you to do that in a way that works pretty good. Now, okay, so I've been talking about modular and working foam and blah, 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 and wood and all that kind of stuff. So what's the downside to it? Well, the downside is I've got a bunch of stuff that at the end of the project, I've still got these layers. It's not this cohesive thing. It's not this all-encompassing thing. It's like in all these pieces. Well, for me, it's fine. Because in my style, or whatever you want to call it, I like to, and a lot of people do this, you just put a facade over it. Well, and that's fine, right? But if you're not a person that has the woodworking of equipment, that doesn't have like a shop or doesn't, then that could be a real roadblock, and that could be a real problem, trying to make a facade for outside of here. There's ways to do it, and creativity is going to get you there. But the fact is, that is something that has to be considered throughout, is the fact of how you're going to finish this thing off. Because I actually have one that I finished off, my Tarawa diorama, and I love my Tarawa diorama, but I didn't have a plan for that, right? And I know how to do it. I haven't done it yet, but I didn't think of it ahead of time. As early on as I was doing these multi-layer, multi-level dioramas, and I wasn't sure how to do it. And then the second thing was, it was circular. So my Tarawa diorama is round, so it turns. Well, this surface is not easy to cover if it's round. So I haven't finished that yet. I do plan on putting a cover on it, but if you're doing this, I would recommend, don't leave it like I did, because Tarawa is out there and I left it open. You got to consider what you're going to put on the outside. Again, be creative. It's not hard to figure out how you want to put something on the outside of this, but it really does need it. So I guess that would be a downside to the modular form. Other than that, heck, I think it's brilliant. I love it because it allows me that freedom that Martin suggested, that freedom to do whatever you want and not destroy something that you already done, because there's elements to this. This didn't, I guess I mentioned this didn't take an hour. This didn't take an afternoon. This took all day. Okay. Well, maybe not all day, but this stuff takes some time. So if I have to do this and then destroy it because I'm just not quite thinking about that stuff in the future, then that could be a negative too. So yeah, think about your modularity. Ease yourself into it. I did. It's not like, again, I just said, hey, today I'm going to build modular. No, not at all. It took me years to figure this stuff out. And I'm hoping that you can, pass some of that and get to it if that's what you're interested in. And it's helpful. Hey, Josh is here. Hello, Josh. Thanks very much. I'm sorry it took me so long to say hi. I was on one of my rambling time, I don't know, whatever, and just talking. But thank you very much for coming by, Josh. Martin, but you are an inventor, Bill. Look at your shop. Well, I'll tell you, it feels like it sometimes because I love building stuff. Okay, so, well, that's a very good point. Why did I build the shop? Why did I start doing this stuff? Well, just because I couldn't find it anywhere and I wanted to build this stuff. I had these crazy ideas of back then when I very first started, Da Vinci models and things like that. Couldn't find it anywhere. The ones that I did find were too darned expensive. And so I had to make myself. There was no videos about how to make them. So I had to figure out how to make them. That's the joy of the shop. That is the joy of creating a diorama and building these things, taking something that, starts out on some plastic flat sprues, and then you build something out of it, beautiful and wonderful. And something that what you finally build, anytime you do a model, I should probably mention this, has never existed on the planet before. Done. So when you build a model, just the model itself, that's never existed on the planet before. I think that's kind of a neat thing. Well, it's the same thing for this. Anytime you build a diorama, it's the very first one. I don't think there's anybody out there really copying dioramas. So it's the only one that's ever been built. That's a pretty fun thing. So maybe inventor, but more of just, wow, it's so fun to build. And, I hope that makes, fun for you too. Nice work. Thank you very much, Project O. I really appreciate it. And you're a new viewer. Thank you very much for coming by. I hope you subscribe and come back. This is every Friday, and then I do the replay on Saturdays. I maybe don't mention that enough. Here's Semelia. I hope I'm saying this, Semelia. Hi, Bill. Custom-made dioramas are so interesting to make, even when you don't quite work out. Still great fun. Keep on wonderful, informative videos. Thank you very much, Semelia. I'll tell you, that is the fun thing about it. I just love building this stuff because it's interesting. You get an idea in your head, And sometimes, I don't know, maybe I'm not a great communicator. And so it's kind of hard to get that idea across of what I'm talking about. And I also tangent a lot. So I'm going everywhere. And so if you can keep up with what I'm saying, boy, good on you, because I'm everywhere when I talk. But it seems like the diorama allows me to kind of calm that brain down, slow it down a little bit, and get something out. Yeah, it takes forever, but it allows me to build those things and those visions and those ideas, and I think communicate much better than I could do through, explaining it or talking to somebody about it. So that's just one of the things that's really super fun about dioramas for me. It's always an adventure. It's always something new. And every time I go into a diorama, I don't know what I'm going to be building 100%. And that's hugely fun. I love that. Eric says, do you build pieces complete and then damage them to show battle damage or collapse from age? Yeah, I think just me. I kind of, I've seen people build broken, right? And do great. Okay. That's not me. I don't think I can build broken. I think I've tried it. I like to build full, right? And then break it, because then I can kind of see how damage would occur, right? I try to bring a lot of information into the diorama and the object or the component or whatever I'm doing. And so like these, though there's not real damage and stuff like that, there will be a little bit, not a heck of a lot, but these will have some damage. I like to build it full, get it in my head, and then I can break it. It just makes better sense for me. Will you damage any part underground? Yeah, I think I will. In a previous World War I diorama I did, this is only my second World War I diorama. The previous one that I did, I had some of the boards had like slipped, had come loose, inside, and some dirt's coming through. Because remember, these folks are getting pounded. Some of these were 35 feet underground. And this really brings up a good point that I've never mentioned, and I probably should. This is 35 feet underground. When I was figuring this out and how deep I wanted to go and how many levels I wanted to go, I initially had 2 less levels than I had here. Okay. Because in previous looking at underground tunneling and things like that done in World War I, I kind of just done underground, and like there was like this much room between the underground element and the ground. It was just like, it didn't make any sense. And I thought I wanted to really represent how far they would dig underground. And some were hugely deep, 90 feet underground was in Beneath Hill 60. And I've been talking about Beneath Hill 60 for like 3 weeks now. And I've said it's under Hill 60 or under, there's something on 61. I've said all kinds of stuff. The movie is Beneath Hill 60. It's a wonderful movie. Very touching. And a lot of the information in here is going to come from that. But so as I'm doing that kind of stuff, or figuring out where this stuff's going to go, if it's 35 feet underground, there's not going to have as much damage as the guy that's 10 feet underground. So that's kind of one of the cool things to kind of think about in doing damage to the underground elements. And how far do I want to be underground for some of the stuff that I have to do? So as I'm going, and this is going to come up later on, as I go forward with the diorama, there's stuff I'm adding that I haven't gotten to yet that is at a certain level because of what it is. Okay? Yeah, I think that'll make sense a little bit later on. So anyway, thank you very much, Eric. That was a great question and comment. So I'm going to try to get back to this stuff, and I'm going to swap this so that we are looking at my PowerPoint. I don't know where the heck I'm going. Here we go. That's where I'm going. So This is what I want to talk about next. If nobody has any objections, this is the main gallery, and what I mean by main gallery is in a lot of the information I've seen, the movies and the like. Um, there seemed to be like one area that everybody went to, hung to, that was kind of like in when I was in the military, it was called a CP, you know, um, and it was your platoon's headquarters. It's like a mini headquarters for your platoon, and so that's what this area is going to be here. It's also going to be the first place that you come to as you get underground, and it's going to be where they're pulling out a lot of dirt, because as you're tunneling, remember, all this dirt has got to come out. They can't just pack it down. So I started building this. This had some unique stuff in it because it has two doorways, which I thought was kind of fun. The other one, just had one doorway, but I changed that. It actually has two now. And so when I'm building this, I don't start doing that cladding or that the woodworking on the outside until I've completely built the frame that it's going to be in. So this whole structure, just like you're doing a house, just like you're doing kind of a timber frame, this whole structure is built, and then I start putting the cladding on it. There's those two doors that are in there, and there's some more stuff we're going to talk about here in a minute, but this is kind of how it looks in. This is the fun part of this. I can remove both of these at any time, work on them, and then, put them back in. They just slip right back in. So again, I'm going to stop talking about modular. I mean, that's how I'm building it. This makes it a lot easier to work on stuff. And if you haven't tried it, I think it works good. Eyeline. Okay, this is a biggie that I really wanted to talk about. So we just saw this picture, but what are we looking at? Well, dead center in the frame of this is a post, right? In this picture, just a different angle, there's no post. I can see all the way back into, to the back of this room that I've created. Here's another picture. So I'm kind of looking, but I'm looking at eye level. And at eye level, I've got a view of everything, to include the ceiling. See, look up on the ceiling of this. That little ceiling, I didn't skimp on detail. I have all the supports. I have all the stuff that it would need to support. Now, I actually put more supports in this a little bit later on that you'll see, but I have to be cautious of that. So when I'm building this, I look at it from every angle, because if somebody does come up to it and looks from a lower angle, I don't want them to say, oh, they didn't do anything there. That doesn't look like it would support that catwalk. Whatever the case may be, build it like it ought to be built, especially if it's woodworking. Okay. Now here's the other thing. Eyeline. We're talking about eyeline. This was the first cutout that I had for the gallery, but the problem is you can't really see back into it. It's too flippin' small. You can't see anything. Now you see in the middle there, I've cut up into the top, and so you can see it. Now there's just a couple more pictures here. And these. Now I'm going to come back in and start talking, because what I want to talk about eyeline is this. When you are, and here's an example. When you have a regular diorama, right? Traditionally, it's just like a surface, and you're looking at the top of your diorama, right? So here's my top of my diorama. I got it there, okay? And I can see it from here. If I stand up, I can look down on it. I got a bird's eye view. If, I can turn the thing possibly, or I can go to the side and I can look at it, and I have a different view there, right? Well, when you're dealing with an underground chamber, you're dealing with walls, you're dealing with a ceiling, you have to consider eyeline. Because if you don't consider eyeline, it's quite possible. I'm going to get this one to show a little different. If you don't consider eyeline, what you might have happen is you build a really cool something or other all the way back in the back of, your little chamber that you're building. And it's really cool. And I've done this. This is why I'm going to say it this way. So it's like the coolest thing ever built. It's just awesome. And then I put it in the back there, and that's going to be like the anchor. That's anchoring this room. That's the coolest thing that I could have in this room. And then later on in the build, I build something even cooler. And I'm not joking. This is not hyperbole. This is true. It's like I built this and I think, man, that's the greatest thing ever built. And it's painted and it looks awesome. And then I build something else and it's not as awesome as the new thing I built. So I put the new thing in front. Well, guess what? Because I didn't think about my eye line, I completely cover that old thing that I built up. Because in a compartment, in a wall, a box diorama, quote unquote, you have a very fixed perception, but not perception, a fixed view. So you can only perceive everything from that view. And so if you don't consider that in building, you may not be able to see all the elements, the details that you're adding. So that is a huge consideration. It's almost unthought of when you're doing a regular diorama, but when you're doing something underground, a chamber, or again, a box diorama, because that's basically what these are, then you've got to really consider how the person's going to see it. So let's go back to a couple of these. Well, I want to say hi. Paul says, hi, Bill. Does the vinegar steel wool solution work on other wood, not just balsa? The discoloration and weather looks fantastic. Thanks very much, Paul. And thanks very much for coming on the show. Yes, it does work. What it's reacting with in the wood is the tannins in the wood. So the higher tannin in the wood, it's going to have more of an effect. But you got to be careful because you get the stuff on your fingers, it'll turn your fingers like dark. So it will affect other things. But the higher tannin levels are really what it's going to attack. Basically, what you're doing is you're dissolving iron inside that vinegar. And it's that iron that's reacting with the help of the vinegar. And so that iron in that is reacting with the tannins. That's where your color comes from. If you get rust in it, or if you get little particles of iron, you don't strain it too good, it'll turn reddish. It'll turn iron color. And your wood, I don't know if I have any left that's kind of reddish. Yeah, I do. Nope, that's not good. This one, it's super hard to see. I'm sorry. But this one, it's actually much more reddish than it is brown. And that's what happens to that vinegar and steel wool solution if you should get any or leave any residue in it and it rusts. The oxide, the rust oxide will turn it red, which is not bad. I mean, I've got two sets of solution, the really good pure stuff that turns to this dark, where I went through the whole process. And I've got that process at the end of our live stream today. I kept that information in. And that's great. And it turns to this dark. But I've got this other stuff that has a little bit of rust in it. It's great because it makes it kind of a reddish color. I did that on these, and they're quite reddish in their color. But I think that's great. I like that on the duck boards. So my duck boards are all kind of a reddish color. And I think that'll come through the mud that's going to be in the trenches when I put those duck boards down. So, yeah, it does work on other stuff. When I think tannins, I think of Scotch and whiskeys and wines and things like that, because oak has a lot of tannins in it, and it's the tannins in interacting with the things that are being aged in the oak casks and barrels that we get a lot of flavor from. And so, that's just what I think. So it's the same thing. The same process. It's the tannins in the wood that are interacting with the vinegar and the steel wool. Okay, so where was I? I have no idea. Eyeline. When I'm looking at these pictures, and I'm going to go back to this picture specifically, the other thing I want to consider is how someone is going to see it on the table. So I hope we've all been to a show or maybe where you're displaying your things, or even if it's just on a low table. Look at the angle that I'm looking at these. Yes, I want to get down at eye level. Yes, I want to maybe raise my diorama like I do on a stand so you can see directly into it. But you have to consider the fact that the angle that a lot of people are going to see your diorama on is from above looking down. So even though I'm going in, I still want to kind of put something in there in where they can see, to get them to maybe, bend over a little bit and look down into the diorama, because that's pretty important, right? I'm putting this detail in, but I can't quite see it unless I kind of maybe, look down and look into it. Well, if I'm going to do that, I don't want to put all the elements that I want to kind of introduce them to this. I don't want to put them back here. I probably want to put that up front, have something up front that somebody can see no matter where they're at, they're walking by or whatever, they can see that. And then they get down and then they can look into it. So you're almost giving them a tease or something that says, hey, there's something neat inside this little compartment, this little room. Come and look further. Okay. So eye line, absolutely important. Now, one of the things that I do, because I'm an older gentleman, the gentleman part, so what I do is I use a yardstick or just a ruler, and it allows me to kind of, when I'm doing my planning, and I'm going to show you how I explained it before. When I'm doing my planning, I'm just standing above here. I'm going to do it this direction. I'm just standing above this, and then I can take my ruler and I can set it there. And if I'm going to have an element like back here, and I've got it like this, well, you can see that there's something here blocking my eye line right there if I have it placed like this, because that element's there. But if I move this over, then I could see it, but it's kind of an obscure angle. So what I want to do is I probably want to use that. That is giving me an eye line, right? So I've got a good eye line all the way to about there. If I move this way, then I can increase the eye line over to here. So do you see what I mean? Determining your eye line as you're figuring out where to put both your rooms or entrances or doorways or even elements that are going to be in that space, it's important to see what the eye line is. I don't have that bird's eye view. Don't expect people to kind of fish around and look and, try to see something cool you put in there. I did that and it didn't work out really well. So make sure that you put the things within eye line so that you can see it. And think about eye line when you're designing the elements that are going to go in your diorama, because you don't want to put something else in front of it or cover it up with something later on in the build. My builds take a long time. I'm just slow, I guess. I do a lot of stuff, sure, but it takes a lot of time. I'm okay with that. The reason is, while I'm doing this stuff, all these things I'm talking about, they're all going through my head, and it takes time to kind of, play out all these things. I'm thinking about eye line. I'm doing my woodworking. I'm figuring out what's going to happen. If you rush through those things, if you try to just crunch it out like I used to do, like in a weekend, I'd have a weekend and I'm going to do this project and everything's going to happen now. You skip over stuff. You don't give yourself time to figure stuff out. And I believe that can sometimes cause you to maybe not get the best thing out. Now, I'm going to say that with a very big caveat, because there's a gentleman that was on earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here, but Rick Lawler. I saw Rick in a 72 for 72 build. Might have been a 48 build. It might have been a 48-hour build. And he works under pressure like nobody I've seen in model building. Oh my gosh. He did this tank in 48 hours. I'll double check my hours, because what he did in that amount of time was remarkable. So I'm telling you how I work. Some people work fantastic under pressure, and he did stuff, Rick Lawler, in this tank that he did in this group build for just a weekend was phenomenal. I mean, he did shirtsing, he did all these extra elements and stuff like that. And it was that pressure sometimes maybe that pressure or that time element may give you something. So find what works for you. I'm telling you what I like and what works well for me. You may have a different way of doing it, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides and see where in the heck I'm at in this whole thing. What's up for next week? Hey, how about that? So this is the front of the diorama, and this is like that main gallery that I showed you. And in the main gallery, coming off to the side of it is a tunnel. So one of the things here is I'm doing all these galleries and I'm doing, the little thing on the side. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to show some tunnels. So it was kind of goofy, but I'm like, holy cow. So this is going to be a tunnel. And so this is going to kind of come around a corner. And then this tunnel is going to show, which I think is really cool. And it's going to show how the tunnel diggers in World War I did it. Now, in the movie that I saw and a lot of the information that I have, these were Anzac miners that were doing this. So that I'm going to concentrate on the Anzac miners. And the information that I found for this, and I'm going to go, man, if I can clear this up so you can see it, I'm going to go to my top down, and I just want to show you, and I've shown you before, but I just want to kind of refresh. This is what this looks like in what they actually built. Now, this diagram, I have the website for you, but I didn't want to post it here because I don't know how that stuff works. But I have the website where this diagram is from, and there's some great information, and it's about the Anzac miners that were brought in. But this is what's going to go in this little tunnel that I'm doing. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the two smaller diagrams here. This is what the digger would do. There were two setups here. There may have been more, but these are the ones they're illustrating, where he's got a backboard where he is laying on his back, and he's got a gatherer or someone who's bagging the dirt into a sandbag laying next to him. And there's a third person behind them loading those sandbags onto a little wheeled cart that goes on some rails, and it gets pulled out of there. This is the methodology that they use for digging these tunnels. These tunnels weren't hard scrabble things. They weren't just, hey, throw up a little. These were highly engineered tunnels by miners that knew their craft well. And they were brought in specifically by multiple nations, frankly, to do this kind of work. The other thing that's in there is, and you may not be able to see it, right in the middle, high above the third person, there's a little cage, and that is a canary. No joke. They did still use canaries in their mining operations in World War I at this time. And so we're going to have a little canary in there and a little bird cage. So I thought that was important. The other thing is, here's the other diagram that I used previously. This shows that vertical shaft that they go down, and here's where they would be pulling out the sandbags as they brought them out of the tunnels and stuff like that. So all of this information, all of this of this is on the website that, again, I'm going to put in here because it is, I think it's good information to have. Hold on. I need to get to the right camera. Sorry about that. Great stuff. John is here. Hey, John. John says, leave Easter eggs, SIGs, mags, metal cups, paper articles, etc. Absolutely. One of the things that is one of those iconic images that I saw in doing research and looking up videos and imagery and all kinds of stuff was shaving. These guys had to shave every day in the trenches. So I've got actually an area right here, and these are right above the sleeping areas. These are sleeping areas in the trench, and right above here, these little things, these are going to have some toiletries, probably a picture, maybe some letter writing and stuff like that. That's what these are. These are almost like shelves. And so, yeah, that is really important stuff to have. Those little personal items, those articles, that's going to bring the reality to it, because these, this is not just a model. I'm trying to depict something that happened to real people. It's a real historical event. I'm not doing an historical diorama, but it's based on historical events. So these things happen. The names are real. The Livens gun is real. So that's kind of, something to consider when you're trying to bring realism into it. Bring personal items. If I'm going into battle, what am I going to have? I'm going to have all my military equipment. Absolutely. I'm also going to have a wallet, right? You have your wallet. You're also going to have a picture of some loved ones. You might have letter writing materials. The military, when I was in the military, one of the very first things you do when you get into the Army is you get stationery and you write a letter home. I don't know where that came from, but it seemed to me at the time they wanted to instill some way of communicating with home that was a very personal way to do it. Because when you read through history, some of the notes and some of the things that soldiers have written, be it they lived or they passed away on the battlefield, and these notes were found, it's very prophetic. These are real instances that real people jotted down, sometimes in the most dire situations in their entire lives, and sometimes at the end of their lives. So writing these things down and having them was hugely important in the military, when I was in the military. Having things like that, I think, put it in your diorama, because it brings something a little bit more to it. I love people to look at the stuff that I build and go, I wonder, whatever they want to wonder, frankly. But I just would think it's wonderful for people to wonder, because the whole time I'm building it, and I imagine the same for you, the whole time you're building something, you're thinking about all kinds of things. Maybe it's funny and there's jokes. Maybe there's a bit of history. Maybe there's a profound moment from a relative that served in that. I've seen a lot of people building models for relatives, aunts, uncles, grandfathers, grandmothers, fathers, mothers that served in the military. And they want to kind of build something as a commemoration of a memory of it. There's no more profound thing that I guess you could do is try to give some of what you're thinking about when you're building your diorama to somebody who's observing it later, right? I've talked about this, not for a while, but I just like it as a artist, whatever you want to call yourself, right? I don't think the title is important. But I think what is important is you're communicating. You're trying to communicate something, and you don't know who you're going to communicate it to. But I'm putting everything that I possibly can put into a diorama so that sometime down the road, somebody is going to look at this and they're going to get something out of it. And if you think about it, I'm communicating to that person. I'm communicating to that person over time and distance. Hopefully it's years from now, if these things survive, the things that I build or things that anybody build. But when you look at that, you're communicating something. I think that's a pretty profound thing. I think that's a wonderful thing. If you're only building a diorama just for you, no problem with that at all. But think about your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, if that can be preserved, and think about them looking at your diorama. What do you want to tell them? What do you want to say? I don't know who's going to look at this stuff in the future, but I'm kind of having that in my mind. What do I want to say? What do I want to get across? What are the ideas that I want to communicate to this person that I have no idea who they're going to be, and I have no idea when it's going to be viewed, and I know nothing else about it, but I know that these are the things I want to communicate. That may be a little bit woo, up here, but these are fun things to ponder and fun things to think about. And there's the ability to communicate like that through dioramas or paintings or drawings or whatever. And I think that's a pretty wonderful thing. Okay, I'm going to get out of the ditch here. Dogs played huge part in war, even once there was a bear that helped out. Great stories. Absolutely. Finding those fantastic stories and bringing them to light is a huge part of, I think, what a lot of diorama and model builders do. When I see a diorama, and it doesn't have to be a diorama like mine, it can be just and I say just, it doesn't mean just, that's not what I meant, but you see a diorama that somebody makes, and it is a story, or it's based on a story that they read, and it's maybe obscure, and they've never heard of it. Well, chances are the people that are viewing it later, they never heard it either. And it's so great to bring to light some of these stories, bringing to light some of these things, because you're keeping history alive. You're telling a story that maybe somebody didn't know about. I didn't know about the Livens, large gallery flame projector before I saw that show years ago. Never even conceived of it. It wasn't talked about in history, but it was a real thing. And so if I'm able to communicate that to somebody later on that didn't know about it, you're keeping that history alive. I think that's very cool. So yeah, John, very, very cool part. John says you could laminate a military jacket into the border, possibly. Laminate a military jacket. I think that's possible. One of the things was the military jackets, like when they were down pilots. So there's an iconic military jacket thing. I'm not exactly sure you mean, John, but I know you're going to clarify it for me. So I'm not worried. So I'm going to go back here and we're going to look at this. The next part is, that's just the side view where you're going to see the guys digging. Now this is the bottom level. Now this is fun. I've told John Roebuck about this and some of the people on Patreon, but I haven't told everybody about this. This is really fun because, okay, so the whole story for this thing is that it is a forward operating element for Captain William Levens, the guy that invented this, right? And so he's got his little laboratory in the side, and then there's that common area. But when somebody's developing something, they need a test area, right? And if you ever saw 007, like the old 007 movies, well, they had a testing area, and that's what this is going to be for me. So on the bottom floor, I'm going to make this kind of like Q in the James Bond movies. You know how Q, you would go down there and get all your cool gadgetry and stuff like that. This is going to be one of those rooms. It's also what I'm going to try and figure out is some way, and this isn't real. I just posted a picture of a part of the Livens gun in the picture here, but I want to try to get like a mock-up of the Livens gun. So maybe they had a scale Livens gun underground that they were testing. And then back here on the back wall back here, I think it would be cool to make that like, not cinder block, but I think in World War I, they'd probably have brick. And so make like that, like a bricked up wall that they're, shooting flame at. So it's like all discolored and stuff like that. And that's a fire break. But yeah, so that's the idea, is that this bottom area is going to be a testing area for the Livens gun and for other stuff. So it's going to be like a Q laboratory underneath. I think it'll be fun. I don't know. I think it'll be really neat looking to have other stuff down there. And why I like laboratories, I don't know. It's just weird. I've done one, maybe, no, I think, yeah, kind of two. This will be my third one. I think laboratories are fun. There's always kind of neat stuff happening in there. So that's what the last part of it's going to be, is that. Then there is something that I'm thinking about for later on, but that's for later on. This is the extent of what I've figured out to do with the diorama so far. So that's it. I hope that is interesting and you think it's cool. Oh, I'm sorry. John clarified to the border of the diorama. I can see that, have a jacket there, like to hold it in. Or are you talking about like the sides that I do? Because jacket you wear? Well, military, that's one that we're going to have to talk about, John. You're going to have to DM me, but I kind of think I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure. Okay, folks. So it's been about an hour and 19 minutes. I think we're all done. I'd love to answer any questions that anybody has. Joshua says, all this knowledge is key for scene building, Bill. You always got a lot of good insight, especially when I needed help on one of my latest projects. Thanks, Bill. Thanks very much, Josh. And I love that project. I think it was very cool. Josh came to me and he was doing one of his kind of dioramas display for his Gundam. And there was a G-Gawk, I believe. I'm not sure, Josh. But I gave him a couple of just, maybe this, maybe that. Well, Josh just took it and it came out awesome. And so that was really neat. So thanks very much, Josh, for the mention. I did very little. You did a brilliant job on that diorama. Came out great. As a matter of fact, that was a buddy build with Mr. Rick Lawler. So that was pretty cool. If you guys haven't seen Josh's stuff, go ahead and check out Propaganda with Rick Lawler, because some of Josh's stuff is on there. They just did a buddy build, just completed it here about a week and a half ago. And then, of course, Josh is on Instagram and stuff like that. And folks, do this for me, please. If you have a website, if you have contact information, a lot of the folks on here may want to contact you. And so please put it in the comments, not in the chat, because that won't really be seen, but put it in the comments of the video, because then, like after it's uploaded, because then people can access it. I'd love for people to see what you do. I've got a lot of people on here that are amazing modelers, amazing diorama builders. And I would love for you to put some of these things up so that other people that are here can see them. So please do that. That would be great. Plus, it, puts more notes in my video, so the algorithm likes it. So yeah, see, I'm always thinking. Thanks, Josh. John, you have done lots of military dioramas. I watched the documentaries on just the secret gadgets. Oh yeah, very cool. And I love secret gadgets. Yes, on the sides. I gotcha. Makes sense. Martin, thank you very much for coming in, Martin from Holland. And John, have a great day, John. Thank you very much. Paul, thank you very much for stopping in. I do this every week, so I'd love you to come back. There will be a replay tomorrow morning. I post the replay at 6 a.m. Pacific time. So there will be a replay available. I was doing it. It would basically post right after this, but there were some issues with quality, the quality of the video. I have to kind of let it all download. I'm still getting used to it. And then I repost it, and then it's much better quality, both sound and visually. So I hope that comes out. And so look for it on Saturday if you missed any part of this. Thank you very much, Mark. It's great to see you, sir. I really appreciate you coming in. Scott, that is wonderful, sir. Thank you very much. Oh, and Evan, wonderful. I hope you make it tonight. That'd be a lot of fun. And Scott, thanks very much. Now, I'll let you know, folks, I am doing a short every day during this entire build. And I've started that. And so every single day there'll be a short. Some of the folks here on the call comment on all those. Scott's one of them. And Scott gives me great feedback and stuff like that. So if you have feedback, please, I'd love to hear your feedback too. Hope to make it tonight. That's great, Evan. I hope you do make it. It'd be wonderful. Paul, thanks very much, Paul. You're always the first one on, Paul. That's really, really cool. Thanks very much for coming on board. Erdink, hello. I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad. Well, I'm not sure when you came in, but there is a replay tomorrow if you didn't get to see everything. It's really great to see you, Erdink. Thank you very much. Martin, it's 10:30 p.m. here. Time for modeling fluid. Cheers from Holland. Have a wonderful time, Martin. And I'm going to wait a little bit longer for my modeling fluid, but I do have some that's ready. And John, thanks, Bill. See you on the Patreon Friday Night Live. That's wonderful. Thanks very much, John. I'm really looking forward to that. Well, thanks, everybody. I had a wonderful time today. I hope you did too. Please like and subscribe. I have a Patreon channel. That Patreon channel is really fun. And one of the things that we do is every Friday night, for the top tier of my patrons, is we have a group build. And it's 3 hours. It's 6 to 9 p.m. West Coast time. And I may move parts of that, or I may have another one coming up, because it's hard for some people to make it. If you're in Europe, or if you're on the West Coast of the US, or the East Coast of the US. So I am thinking about doing other group builds, because I really enjoy it. And it's really fun to connect with folks. Just building, and when we're on those group calls, we can talk back and forth. You're on live, not just through chat. So I'd love it if some of you would like to be able to join the patron and then be there. It's really fun. Scott, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Scott. It's just really great. Love your comments every time, and it gives me great ideas too. Samelia, thanks, Bill. Loads of great info. Greetings from the UK. Thank you so much for coming in, and I hope to see you next week. We do this every single week, and it's at Fridays at noon Pacific, and I hope to see you then. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.